You're set.
We're live.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to reconvene the Thursday, October 13th, 2022 meeting of the Lake Forest Board of Education. If you would all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Welcome everyone who has joined in person as well as those who have joined online. Just a reminder that we are streaming tonight's meeting live across the internet. And that meeting minutes and recording will be posted once approved. Start this evening with roll call of board members. Dr. Wyatt.
Here.
Mrs. Starkey.
Here.
Vice President Rao.
Here.
And President Earl Dempsey serving as chair is present. We have 4 board members present this evening. Thank you all for being here. We want a 2.4 approval of agenda, Mr. Rao.
Make a motion, we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
I make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes from. Scroll down the line.
322.
From September 22nd, 2022, as written.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0. Item 2.7, citizens participation, opportunity for members of the public to address the board. If you were interested in addressing the board, we'd ask for you to sign in upon your arrival and turn that into superintendent's office. Ms. Piccolo, do we have anyone this evening? All right, we do not have anyone signed up this evening, and so we will close public comment. We will reopen again at the start of our next meeting. We're on to section 3 reports. Start with 3.1 financial reports. Mr. Kurt Kellerman. Welcome, Mr. Kellerman.
Good evening. This evening, we have the monthly board financial report for the end of September 30th. So we're about a quarter of the way into the fiscal year. So really, the only major changes up in the state funds section, we did pick up our minor capital improvement funds. We were able to transfer some funds from our local reserve over into that minor capital improvement local match required for the state. In order to demonstrate that we have our 40% in order to get the state's 60% funding match. So as soon as we let this big tax deposit hit at the end of the month, then we'll basically pay ourselves back. So we just did a little transfer of funds to demonstrate that we have the funding necessary to get those funds from the state. The other item there on the state funds is the middle school mental health. We did receive all that funding, $310,000. And that's the second piece of legislation that's come out for mental health. The first being the K-5 mental health that was funding counselors, social workers, and psychologists. And so now that is built into our unit count for K-5, but this is the middle school portion of that. And so the first year, this will be a block grant, basically the middle school mental health block grant. And then next year that will be wrapped into our unit count as well. So we'll earn state authorized units for those counselor psychologist positions. So those are really the only changes on the state side. Down in the local funds, you can see we've picked up some current expense tax receipts and really everything down the row there of local funds, because that's the second largest tax deposit we have of the year that just hit. And so the other thing I'll point out is all those allocations are roughly equal right now. They're all in kind of alignment, the 14-15%. Because I know we've seen that before. As we get towards the end of the year, they're all over the place. And so right now they're nice and in alignment, and that's because we haven't introduced that senior property tax credit yet, where it just kind of throws everything out alignment there. Federal funds, we just got word that did get approved at the Department of Education level, but we still haven't received the funding yet for that. So 66% of all funds, or 66% for all funds received compared to 62% last year. Any questions on the revenue side?
Questions for Mr. Kellerman on revenue?
Moving on to the expenditure side. I mean, encumbrances are ticking up, but there's really nothing significant to report on this first page here. Local salaries are in line with what we were anticipating. And then as we move on to the second page, the only thing I would point out in that upper section, you can see North Elementary and Central Elementary are below the 50% remaining for their budget, but that's only because they have a higher amount of encumbered funds, so it makes it look a little out of alignment there. So they're just putting more money on purchase orders, that's all. That's really all the major items that I was going to point out on the expenditure side of the report. We're at 73% of the discretionary budget remaining compared to 71% last year, so we're slightly ahead. And the all funds budget, we're at 78% remaining compared to 78% last year, so pretty much right in line. Any questions on the expenditure side?
Any questions on expenditures or anything else for Mr. Kellerman? Just one minor thing. So I appreciate you offering the 71% last year from total discretionary. That's not on here though. Is that something you could?
I go back and look that
Okay.
up. If you want me to start putting that on the report, I can.
I would like that if possible.
Okay, absolutely.
It's nice to see down at the bottom overall what we have, but the
Yeah.
discretionary certainly is what we are most concerned with. So that
Sure.
comparison would be beneficial.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, anything else for Mr. Kellerman? All right. Thank you very much. 3.2 Superintendent Report, Dr. Lucas.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Wanted to start tonight by reporting that our Teacher of the Year, Mrs. Lindsay Saxton from Lake Forest High School, is recognized this week along with 19 other Teachers of the Year around our great state. Although she was not selected as Delaware's Teacher of the Year, she represented Lake Forest well, and we were proud to have her as our representative. Congratulations, Mrs. Saxton, and keep up the amazing work that you do for us here in Lake Forest. I'd also like to mention that this month is National Principals Month. So I see Mrs. Dotson back there trying to hide, and a number of other former principals in the room. So there are very few jobs that require both the breadth and depth of knowledge. So many things. Our principals are called each day for comfort and expertise. They're called on to serve as everything from school safety and security experts to building managers to crowd control and everything in between. They hand out tissues and Band-Aids, provide feedback on instruction, kill spiders, clean up spills, always listen, and are helpful in every way. So principals are true community leaders, heroes, and we are proud of each of you. So congratulations to our principals. Thank you, principal, this month. This week's been Spirit Week across the district, which culminates tomorrow evening with the homecoming parade in Harrington. Parade starts at South Elementary School and finishes at Delaware Street and Highway 13. Then Saturday is our homecoming football game. Kickoff is at 11:30 in the morning at the stadium. We ask that people arrive early, refrain from bringing large bags or backpacks into the stadium, as space is always at a premium. Check our website for any more specifics about the parade or the game. First marking period interim reports were posted in the Home Access Center Monday. If you've not done so already, I encourage everyone to check their students' progress, reach out to someone at their home school if you have any concerns. Following this busy weekend, there's just a ton of things going on, so I ask everyone to please stay in tune with both the district and your homeschool calendar so you don't miss anything. A couple of upcoming events next week include Math Night at Central on Monday, Literacy Nights at South on Wednesday, and North on Thursday. High school marching Spartans are back in action with the Tournament of Bands at home next Saturday. We meet right back here on Thursday, October 27th. Will be our next Board of Education meeting here in 2 weeks. So that's it for announcements. I thank you. I yield the floor back to President Lepsy.
Thank you, Dr. Lucas. Any questions, discussion for Dr. Lucas, Superintendent's report? Mrs. Starkey.
I fielded a few questions in the last couple of days about the parade route. It ending at 13 and that being a little dangerous maybe. Do you know if there's anything set up there to block the road or what they're planning to do?
Yeah, good question. Harrington PD will have 13 blocked and Delaware Street blocked. So their plan is that the parade will end shortly before the highway there, so kids can disembark. Anybody that is participant in the parade, they can disembark. They can pick up their rides on any of the numerous side streets that are in the area there. And then the vehicles can take a left right there on the highway and head right back up here to the district to drop off their trailer, whatever they have. Yep, it's all set.
Mhm.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lucas.
Thanks, Mr.
Huh?
All right, section 4, unfinished business, 4.1, safety and security. Mr. Weller.
All right, good evening, everybody. Over the last 2 months, we've had presentations here to discuss school constables coming to Lake Forest. So over the past couple months, we have discussed a variety of different things. We've asked for community surveys and different things. I'm here tonight to kind of tie up the loose ends and so we can move forward with this process. A lot of my presentation is things that we've seen before, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them. But as we look at our first slide with what we've done, I just want to add to it. Over the first couple weeks here in October, we've had the Delaware State Police coming into each one of our locations and conducting infrastructure assessments at each one of our buildings. We're going to tie them up actually next week. The weather has not been cooperating with us when we've been scheduled to have the police here, so we have to complete some outdoor work next week, but they've been coming, and so we're still doing some things to look at some structural upgrades and seeing what cameras maybe we need to fix, or any doors or any hardware or anything infrastructure wise we need to take a look at. So I just wanted to highlight that for everybody. Like I said, currently what we're doing now, the school administrator is the person who is the safety lead for each building and is responsible for making sure that drills are done, making sure that security checks are done, making sure that inspections are done and everything of that nature. So basically, we came a couple months ago asking for the authorization of that we hire school constables in each one of our schools. Like I said, the next couple slides are redundant. They've explained what a school constable is. It is somebody who does have limited powers, who may carry firearms and things like that. So basically, how does one become a school constable? That's still the same information that has been from our previous presentations. So when we take a look at Delaware school districts approved to utilize school constables, since my first presentation back in August, Laurel and Seaford have also climbed on board with hiring school constables. Laurel and Seaford both currently have postings available for school constable positions, and they're looking to fill school constables in each one of their schools. So that's different from our first presentation. And still, Smyrna is still using unarmed personnel at certain locations for their schools. All other schools are using SROs or more traditional types of security enforcement. So basically what we would like to do tonight is we would like to get approval for the postings for constable and lead constable positions. I have outlined the recommended qualifications for constables. Basically, in all of my discussions with the other districts, I've been advised to follow the Indian River playbook when it comes to hiring school constables, because there's a lot of complicating factors that go into hiring school constables. And if you don't hire people with the right qualifications, you may have to hire somebody and then they not be approved for 6 months for hire or to be ready to do the job. So basically, our recommended qualifications, we're looking for people who have previous law enforcement experience, a minimum of 20 years. They must possess and maintain firearm certification. They must be able to obtain certification as an instructor in school intruder management through Homeland Security. And also they must have working knowledge of various systems that are used to deal with safety planning in school districts. So our primary responsibilities for constables, these are the responsibilities that will be outlined in our proposed job posting. This really has not changed much since my first presentation. Basically, we want to make sure that the constable is the safety lead for each location that they are at. So if a constable, let's say, is responsible for Lake Forest North Elementary School, we want to make sure that they are the lead for the safety team. They are coordinating drills. They are doing safety inspections, setting up any types of in-service or training, and also informing buildings and grounds, myself, various personnel of any safety issues that need to be addressed. So, and along with the other duties of being out for traffic duty, lunch duty, recess duty, extracurricular activities, providing support for those. When we talk about the lead constable performance responsibilities, really a lot of them will fall in the same line as a constable, except with the exception of we would expect them to do more with the district safety team. And also to making sure that our constables are up to date on their firearms certifications, also coordinating constables at extracurricular activities such as games, events, nights at the schools, things like that. So really just kind of taking a lead and making sure that all the constables are up to date on their certifications and things of that nature. When we talk about the cost per constable, we've really updated this. And the constable pay scale, we're looking more in line with our para pay scale currently. As of this point, we are looking at the earliest as possible is December 1st for a start date. So this would be the year one cost, and this would be the reoccurring cost. So a couple of things that we are looking at is we are looking at utilizing safety grant money on the local side. And also too, we are looking at the potential of using Division I units to fund some of this venture as well. Neither one of these are long-term interventions. As safety grant money, you know, we will need to use it eventually to update our infrastructure further. And also too, we may not always have the guarantee that Division I units would be available for us to use because our first goal is to fill them with instructional purposes in the classroom. So basically, recently we sent out a survey to the community. It was a 3-question survey. It was active for a period of 3 weeks. So we had a total of 445 respondents to a question asking how comfortable you would be with your child in a school with a school constable. And that is a breakdown right there of the comfort level that was reported to us. We had 445 respondents. Approximately 90% were somewhat or very comfortable with having a school constable. 4% did not have an opinion either way. And approximately 6% were uncomfortable with having a school constable in their school. There's a breakdown in pretty much most of the schools. When it was broken down by response, it really fell within a pretty similar ballpark, how the numbers played out. So there's a breakdown that you guys would have there. One of the questions that was brought up in our survey was if the district needed to fund an operating referendum to fund a school constable program, how likely are you to vote for a tax increase to fund the program? 5 being the most likely, 1 being the least likely. As you can see the breakdown of the results there. Again, I want to stress to everybody that while we are looking at every avenue right now to fund this constable program, utilizing safety grant money and utilizing Division I units is not something that we see as a long-term fix for funding this. So eventually, this may be an item that we may have to ask taxpayers to fund. So there is a breakdown of the answers there, and that was given by the community. So what we are asking from the Lake Forest Board of Education is that we are asking that the board approve the job description used for the posting, along with salary scales for the position of lead constable and constable in the Lake Forest School District. The district would then post and hire filling priority areas according to need as funding mechanisms would allow. And then additional factors that we still want to make sure that we're very clear to the community is that it is still our plan to utilize SROs. And also to Delaware Early Childhood Center is also like, let's say we have a constable and an SRO on the South Chipman Deck campus, is to make sure that we're providing support to Deck as well, considering that all to be one campus. So with that said, I will take any questions that you guys may have.
Great, thank you, Mr. Weller. Questions and discussion from the board on presentation and Constable Health. So, when we last had this discussion, I believe what we had talked about was easing into it, and not diving in until we had proven methods and procedures in place. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but starting off with like, I want to say maybe 2 or 3. Where do we stand today as far as the ask or the recommendation?
So currently, the goal would be is to hire a lead constable first. Get a lead constable in, work with developing procedures, and we got to do things from get uniforms to identify firearms instructors and certifiers, and making sure that we set up the proper processes and procedures. From there, it is our goal is to try to get to 4 constables, well, three constables and the lead, with each one of them fulfilling a role at each campus location that we've identified. So for example, we would look at filling it north and east, and then 1 for the Central High School campus, and then 1 for the Chipman South and Deck campus. Eventually, if everything is successful, our goal would be is to have a school constable in each school, somebody who could be the safety lead in each building. And then, at that point, we would have an SRO and a constable at Chipman, a constable at South, and then providing support to Deck through those means as well.
Sure. Agreed. And I think the discussion's been as long as everything tested out as we expected, and as we desire, and as well that there was a funding mechanism in place to be able to do so. Okay. So I know the job descriptions are later in the agenda for approval, so I think we'll reserve any specific. See, Mr. Rao's got a couple of things redlined, and I do as well, so we'll reserve discussion on those until we get to that. Any other questions or discussion on the overarching topic at this point?
So,
Mr. Rao.
so would the intent then to be, I mean, this is a question for Dr. Lucas, would the intent then to be to come back to us with, we want to hire X number, or is it just going to be carte blanche, or is it going to hire based off of us approving positions?
Yeah, typically, I think that's what, generally with most positions, that's the way we do it, is we get a position approval and then they're based on need. So I think that's unless the board.
In my experience as a board member, the only time we've ever approved a position, it's been a position for a person. It's never been a position open to interpretation. Typically, they've been administrators, things like that, where it's only going to be 1 person in general. This type of position where it's approving a title, we've never, to my knowledge, my last 8 years, we've never done that. So I've never had experience with that. So that's why I have a little bit of reservation. I'm totally in favor of doing this, but it goes back to my responsibility of a steward of financial interest. For me, there's 2 fold. 1, I kind of would like to see us, as we talked and as we kind of were led to believe, we're going to ease our way into this, get our toes wet, make sure that we don't jump in full force and realize we're in over our heads. And I'm not saying we're going to do that, but my concern is if we hire 6 people, 4, 6 people, then we start seeing things that we may have done differently, those kind of things. So I don't understand necessarily why, just because it looked like in the funding piece of it, we're going to use some Division I units. Why, just because the funding is there now, we're now taking away the initial apprehension we had of doing that. So I'm not sure if I'm okay with that piece, is my main thing. And I'm not saying that I'm not okay with doing that, but I would rather just gradually do it in steps.
And so let me piggyback off that and ask a question. So tonight, we move ahead, we approve the positions and the job descriptions and stuff. The immediate action, correct me if I'm wrong, but the immediate action that I'm hearing is we're gonna post for the lead. Right, and then we're gonna pursue that before we go out for traditional constable. Is that accurate?
Well, the way it's envisioned is that we would post for both. However, we would hire the lead first.
Okay.
And then get the lead in place, because there's a couple of complicating factors here. For one, the Board of Examiners does not meet again until January to approve our constables. So we
From
have.
now until January, okay.
Correct. So we wouldn't, so basically, we're in a situation now where we have a chance to build up an applicant pool.
Okay.
To see if we have an applicant pool that's worthy. You know, there's a good chance that I might come back to you and we might not have the applicant pool that we would believe we would like or we anticipate. You know, and kind of taking things from there, but our goal is to get the lead in first. And then once we have the lead in, is then to pull that lead in to be part of the interviews for the constable positions, and then hire those constables to get them started and get them approved for January.
So we would essentially be posting for 2 positions. We would not be posting for 4 positions, meaning a lead and a constable at this school, a constable at this school, a constable at this school, right? We would post for a constable and we would post for lead constable.
Yes,
And we would see what the pool came back with.
correct.
For those.
But from that, under the current plan, if there are constable applicants that meet the qualifications, the theory is that you would hire more than one.
Correct.
Yeah, so I know we received the funding sheet with a couple examples. My only thing, I would just like a little more before we pull the trigger on a total of 4. I would like to have just to be able to digest and understand the funding implications. And then certainly one thing is those units that we would potentially be using. What's the trade-off? Meaning, where else would could those units potentially be used in the school's direct contact with students and needs and such? So I mean, so maybe when we get to the positions, when we approve. We might as well just do it now. We're really just talking about the positions and the job descriptions at that point. So I mean, I'm totally on board with posting for both once we get them approved. But just before pulling the trigger on multiple constables, that we have a better understanding of what that it actually is, how that's going to play out. Both from a process and procedure standpoint and also from a funding standpoint. Another thing I was thinking when you, as you were going through, so, you know, this is a new position and the folks that are in it are kind of going to be learning it or developing it as we go along. But I know from a overall perspective, these will report probably up through you, Dustin, is that correct?
So
Yeah, so, okay, so so they're gonna report directly to their building principal.
Correct.
Is that, so that to me, because it's a new position that now, all of it, to my knowledge, none of our principals have had a position like this reporting to them. I would want to make sure that we are providing them with the appropriate guidance of how they're expected to lead and to manage this person, this new position in their building as well. So that's a part of it I had not thought about previously. I don't know, maybe administration has. But
And we have, I've been in regular contact with the student services supervisor at Indian River, who was the first one to have school constables in his district, and we walked through a lot of the processes and procedures and setting a lot of things up and playing the playbook. And there will be, of course, some training and some expectations that are set with our building principals on how this position will be handled and how this position will be evaluated.
Because I equate it, yeah, I mean, certainly like an SRO, but even like a nurse, right? I mean, a nurse is in school and dedicated to kids, but the work that they do and what is behind them is a lot different than all other aspects of the folks that are reporting to me. So managing that person to me is a little different, and I think the constable's gonna be the same way. So just want to make sure we cover that piece. Any additional discussion on this topic at this point? Great. Thank you, Mr. Weller. Thank you, Dr. Lucas. You're welcome. All right, we are on to section 6.1 board policy first readings. This is a discussion item. We have several board-owned policies to go through this evening, so we'll jump right in. Going through one by one. We'll start with BBB board membership, elections, and appointment. Yeah, so we had asked, last meeting, we had a discussion, and we saw some overlap between this policy and the next one, the BDB board officers. So I'll just say real quick, I thought everything in both policies belonged under BDB.
I have the same thing with the entire thing here.
Right.
And then
Mhm.
triple B needs to be one, Department of Election Information, and then two, how we go about appointing somebody if they either resign for whatever reason, move out of the district, whatever the case is, if we have a vacancy to fill before an election for a short term, how do we go about doing that?
So do you think just this entire current BBB moving at the end of,
I have,
The BDB?
I have just that, move that entire thing to the end
to
of
the end of,
BDB.
everybody kind of in agreement with that?
Yes.
So Ms. Piccolo, we're good with that. All right. So that takes care of BDB. So now with BBB, so here's what I found. So BBB, so I was in the same vein as you, Mr. Rao, board membership, elections and appointment. But I went to the policy manual. Ms. Piccolo, I don't know if you have it to check me. I found that there is a BBBE, so triple B with an E, that is unexpired term fulfillment / vacancy, which we don't have one of. So, it seems like there's multiple places we could potentially put what we're talking about wherever we feel is right. Because right now we're going to have no BBB. So do we rewrite BBB with the stuff we're talking about or this other one, or do we separate it into two? Did you find that match?
Yeah, so under BBB, board membership, elections, appointments, at the end of the description, it says this code establishes the general category. However, some districts will want to use the following specific codes instead, and then it lists the rest of them where triple BB is found. So it's
Okay.
almost like an or thing. you
So
could
the
do.
BBB is the high level category and there's something
Umbrella,
underneath.
yeah.
Is there a description for BBBE?
No.
I love these letters.
No.
Okay, so there's no guidance in okay. So. So we could certainly address both items in the BBB. And I had a very.
I mean, with the word appointment in the title, we just need to, is the only way, we can't appoint anyone to the board. The only way that happens is, the only way that's going to happen is with a vacancy, a short-term vacancy.
So then I think this will take a little bit of work on the board's side to craft something and bring it back for first reading. So maybe
Triple B should be.
triple B should be pulled. Yeah. So we will, the board will take responsibility, Dr. Lucas, and craft something there to bring back to first reading. And BDB, we will push ahead with combining the two. Yeah. Great. Anything else on those two? All right. BEBA, public hearings. So there is no BEBA in the manual, if you can check me on your version. Ms. Pickle. I found that there is a BEB, special board meetings. That was about the closest we came to the content of this policy. So with that said, Mr. Alice, a lot of red on your sheet.
So having heard that, I did not go as in depth as you did. So if there's a BEB that covers any special board meeting, should we, and this is not in the manual, should we just 86 it?
Yeah, I don't. And I don't remember. I think I checked and we do not have a BEB. So for some reason, if what I said is correct, for some reason, we didn't feel it was necessary to write a policy on special board meetings. But we felt it necessary to have one for public hearings, even though there was no category for it. I'm not sure why.
So can I go one step further?
Sure.
What would be an example of a board special hearing? Or
Public hearing?
That's my question.
I mean. County has public hearings when they're doing certain things with land. We wouldn't necessarily have a public hearing on, for example, doing a referendum. I don't know what the. You know, we have workshops. I don't know what an example of us having a public hearing would be.
I can't think of any that we have had, right? We've had workshops. That's more for the board that are for discussion that's open to the public. So, yeah, there's a separate policy. So your recommendation, Mr. Rowell, I heard is maybe why do you need this?
I mean, I just don't, if that's the case, because I do have a lot of markups with this, but if if we don't need the policy, why do we have the policy?
And by
Are
not
there any
having,
in other words, I'm sorry, are there any other mechanisms in any of our other policies that even prescribe how you get to a board public hearing?
Would you consider these many years ago, we had some public sessions on dress code changes? Would that fall into the realm of a public hearing?
Was that a workshop though, or was it just public comment on?
It was just a public comment where the public was entitled to speak.
I mean, so in that scenario, it's like this actually gives detail on like back and forth with the body, which we don't do. And so that's, I mean, so the only differentiation is with our public comment, which I think that's actually, there's a reference to that later as well. There is no dialogue with public comment. Public comment is made and that's it. You get your 3 minutes and we don't enter. You can, but typically there's no expectancy of dialogue with the board during public comment. This does allow for the board president to then entertain that. But that would have to be an agenda item on our agenda, and it's just, you can't do a public hearing within an agenda, so it's something different. I just don't know where this would come into play, because that could be handled during a workshop.
yeah.
Looks like it.
So I hear public hearing, it's almost like there's a decision, we hear things and at the end there's a decision made, and I don't know that we've ever done that.
Yes, yes.
It
Ms.
looks like it originated all the way back in 2008, so it's been around.
And certainly by not having a policy created doesn't preclude us from determining we're going to have a public hearing if and when it was necessary. But I now agree that potentially, I don't know why we have something outlined like this for something that's not utilized.
Sounds like it's wrong. Crucible and City Proctor.
So I would be open to the recommendation of removing it. Again, especially since there is no enumerated policy in the manual for this. Okay, so recommend for removal. Great, thank you. On to BEDF. Voting method. Discussion on BEDF. Mr. Rao.
Top paragraph, third sentence, as it's written, a three-member quorum could not pass a motion with a 2-to-1 vote. Which is incorrect. So I have new language.
Yes, so I had this one asterisk, I had this one starred,
Yeah, so
so this is one, always like to bring to everyone's attention.
So that's, that last sentence, I would rewrite, 3 board members are needed to establish a quorum, comma, and a motion or resolution will be considered adopted when it has received the affirmative vote of the majority of the voting board members. And I,
So,
I can do it.
yep, so in your case, with what you're recommending, 2-to-1.
You're
must
ident-
pass.
as it should.
Mhm,
You're identifying a quorum,
mhm.
and then now you're saying that any resolution is going to pass with the majority of the voting members present. So my next question is, so the tie vote piece, I think we should just completely remove to begin with.
Right, how could it be?
And then, and not only that, should we even remove that portion and then reference Robert rules? Because now we're identifying 2 pieces of voting, but there are so many other factors that come into voting that affect a proper vote, things like that. And we're just kind of narrowing down to 2 that we're gonna put in policy. But there are so many others that come into play, so.
Yeah, so that, what that was always referenced to me is only the scenario where you have 4 board members present. And you end up with a 2-to-2 vote. It's the only scenario that could possibly happen. Robert's rules, you don't have a majority, motion fails. In this case, it has to come back to the next meeting. So, you're recommending doing away with,
I was asking.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Now that you say that, I do see that point, so.
It's always been odd to me because it's, again, I know we say we loosely follow Robert's rules, but this has been a very interesting scenario for me, all along. We've never had it come up, but never say never.
We good with the language I read initially?
I'm good with 2-to-1, a 3-member meeting, 2-to-1 majority. Motion passes. So yes, I'm good with that. We can provide the language to Ms. Piccolo that you have for that. So I'm good with that. Now, the other one is, do we want to?
No, your example, which I didn't, so that's the thing, though, it's referencing the 3, but that's only to establish the quorum. So to that point, yes, if you have 4 present, tie vote, that makes sense.
And I guess I should have also, it could potentially happen where you have 3 and 1-to-1 with an abstention. Would be another scenario. So we're fine with leaving it that it comes back to the next board meeting. Okay. Mrs. Stark, you good with that?
So just a question, should that first comma be removed, in any case, comma? In any case in which? My grandma.
In any case, there's too many ends.
To read the sentence without that middle line, because the comma basically, in any case, a tie vote will affect.
Should be.
Yeah. In
It should be on
Because otherwise,
or
you
remove.
can read over that whole section.
in the case, there is a tie vote of the board.
In the case of a tie vote.
In the case of a tie vote, okay. Okay. All right. Anything else on this one?
Do you want to go strictly with the NEPN titled voting method at board meetings, just to keep it?
Yes.
Just thinking of-
So to that point, should we add a reference that all other points of order with voting will follow Robert's rules? Or no?
Sure,
Just a question, since I'm the parliamentarian.
yes. Do we reference Robert's rules anywhere else in our policies? Like, is there a policy that says we will follow, or is that just then an assumption that this board operates as all other boards? do? Yeah, I think we can add it, no problem. So we'll have this for you again. All right, thank you. BEDI, news media services at board meetings. Discussion on this policy. Mr. Rao? No. Okay. Moving on, BEDK, reporting board meeting business. Discussion on this policy.
Yeah.
Mr. Rao?
Third paragraph and the fourth paragraph, I would take the beginning portion of the fourth paragraph and add that as the lead in sentence for the third paragraph. To say, while every effort will be made to provide the media with authorized and or approved information, comma, delete the rest of that sentence and then say, when individual board members receive requests. And then to finish that paragraph, I would eliminate or their designee. It should be the superintendent or the board. And if you wanted to, you could add in accordance with policy, whatever that policy is already identifies. The only people on behalf of the board that can speak to the public are the board president and superintendent. No individual board member should have a designee to talk on their behalf to the media.
So this would read, while every effort will be made to provide the media with authorized and or approved information. When individual board members receive requests from news media for information about this board business, the members will refer the reporters to the superintendent or the board president for.
In accordance with
in accordance
policy,
with policy,
whatever that policy is.
Okay. Discussion on that suggestion. Well, I just wonder, I want to make sure that that policy doesn't also call out designees. But even if it does, we're still referencing that policy, so it doesn't matter.
And I was wondering if that designee is, connected to the superintendent, because in a lot of our policies, it says superintendent or designee. You know, so it might not be a designee for the board member, but a designee for the superintendent.
So for me though, we don't have a information specialist, which we've talked about potentially having that kind of position created. Since we don't have that person, no one should be speaking to media other than those people. So there shouldn't be a designee created for talking to the media.
District could not be reached for comment. Is what we reported instead, so that's cool. Okay, so we'll have this one for you too, Ms. Piccolo. Moving on to BF, school board work sessions and retreats. Discussion on BF. Seeing none, on to, excuse me, BGA, policy development system. Any discussion on BGA? Seeing none, move on to BGC, policy revision and review. Discussion on BGC.
Just have
Mrs.
one
Stark.
Question, are there, like this talks about the policies every 3 years and 5 for the state and federal ones. But do we have any that we bring up every year? Like, don't we bring up the grading one? And if so, is that policy? Because I know it says that we can review them sooner if need be, but are there any that we want to put in policy that should be reviewed every year? And maybe not, it was just a question, just to make sure we're not missing anything.
So in the past, I don't know. I think we've happened to review like the grading policy every
Okay.
year,
Seems like every year we do, so that.
but I think it's just
I
been
think the
because
grading policy is on a 3-year cycle and it came back because of a
Right.
specific reason.
Okay,
and it's just that every year it's been a specific
okay,
reason.
I
I think so. And I think that's gonna change a little bit now as well, because we rolled them all into the
The big, the manual.
yes, student code of conduct.
But to that point, though, the line in here that says they may be reviewed sooner if circumstances dictate that protects us.
but there aren't any other ones that we reviewed.
I don't think there's anything that's prescribed to come back every year.
One really minor thing, second to last line, I think should be a dash between the 5 and the 5-year. All right, moving on to BHC, Board Communications with Staff. Discussion on BHC. All right, moving on, BIA, New Board Member Orientation. Discussion on this policy. Just a formatting thing, I think, where else, there's one other policy somewhere that was enumerated that there was not spaces between. So this policy and the next one do have spaces, so we can verify what we've been doing. All right, moving on, BIB, Board Member Development Opportunities. Discussion on BIB. Mr. Routon.
Before, should accord be accordance?
I read the same thing.
Accordance with-
Yeah, it makes more sense. Okay, so change accord to accordance. Anything else on this policy? Just same thing with the spacing of the enumerated items. All right, BID. BID we have labeled as expenses for guests. The BID, what I found, it says board member compensation and expenses. You can check me on that. So under that. It's a little, had to be a reason we called out the specific details in this policy, but. This is one we may need to look at. Rewriting if there's specific things that we want to address. Because there is nothing in the manual specifically about guests, and expenses for guests. Yes, Ms. Bigelow.
Years ago, when you would go to the board conferences, that's the main time we would use this policy to pay for the guest, the board member would pay for the guest. I don't know if you want to include that in travel.
My feeling is if they take a guest to a conference, the guest is on their own. I mean, they get to stay at the hotel with you, but that's it. I mean, I don't think the board should be paying for guests to go to a conference or.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. They share the room that was being purchased anyway.
Other than that,
Travel is on them. But anyway, the policy we have written doesn't follow the manual. So we want to rewrite slightly and include these things under the board member compensation and expenses. Or is just change the title and leave everything as it is.
What's the title supposed to be?
Board member. What do you have?
Board member compensation and expenses, and the description says to use for information on whether and how much board members are compensated for board services and what expenses are reimbursable. The procedure used to submit expense claims should be fully described.
Well, the compensation part's a real short policy.
That's why it's not.
Yeah, so we've always, we've always just fallen under the travel compensation for the district employees. So I mean, in theory, you could just pull the language from there and plug that in here for anything we do, because that's basically how we've done this. My opinion would be to change the title to how it should be. This looked like it was crafted from some one-off experience and doesn't, to me, it doesn't.
Made to fit.
Yeah. Because technically, we are not district employees, so.
All right, so,
Not technically, just we're not.
okay, why don't we,
So I would change that title and then we may have to take a look at that other policy, because some of that language is not gonna apply. We just fall under certain aspects of it, so we need to pull that one as well, and then find out what we want to do in this.
We'll keep track of the ones we're pulling for. Let's take a look at.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think in that travel policy, district employees are allowed to bring staff, guests and have them work, we'd be bankrupt.
Everybody has to read, pay for them.
Everyone's like laggard now.
Okay, so we will bring the full BID from first reading and we'll work to craft something. All right, I believe we're up to BKA, liaison with school board associations. Discussion on that one.
I mean, it was just maybe add that sentence as one paragraph instead of having a one sentence paragraph.
Yeah,
I think
that's great.
I think that can join us all.
And is the title actually boards plural, associations
I
plural?
just looked at that too, yes.
Okay.
the section.
It's a mouthful. You read that one. All right, moving on to CBI, evaluation of superintendent. Any discussion on CBI as written?
No discussion on as written, but just a question and a comment that we need to consider, because the last time we did this, we used a format that was related to DPAS. DPAS has been done away with for evaluation, so I would be curious to see what other districts are now doing, what format they're using for evaluations, if they even are, because the last time we were contacted by Dr. Myers and Kate, she was surprised that we were actually doing an evaluation because no one else, she was doing a project for her doctor, or maybe at the time, she was surprised that I even gave her a response because no one else was responding because they weren't evaluating the superintendents. It has been a few years since we've done that, but I think it's only fair to argue that it all do that in the district person for growth. So
What is the new administrator system?
So it's still referred to as DPAS, but it's DPAS for administrators.
Okay.
So it is completely restructured and
Format's
it's
changed.
completely, all the formats, completely rubrics are different. So there are resources that, and that system is a statewide system that's connected to administrators who have an impact on student learning, which also is connected to the student measures. For those administrators in the district that are not connected to that, like our buildings and grounds, we have an internal evaluation form that we use that's similar to DPAS, but it's structured a little bit more around operations and people management and systems management and connections to our strategic plan.
Like format that you can email to us to take a look at, just to see if there's some aspect we can pull of that.
Sure, I can send you both the DPAS for administrators and our internal. And we can always create something.
Yeah, it's a good starting point, so.
And is this a topic we can potentially bring up again or ask at DSBA? In the forum?
Would be a bad idea, you know.
Great, thank you all. Moving on to CHD, administration in the absence of policy. The discussion on CHD. Seeing none, move on to FG, board inspection and acceptance of new facilities. Discussion on this one. I just found it interesting. We have 5 one-sentence paragraphs. I thought the second and third could be combined to one, and the fourth and fifth could be combined to one. Anything further in this policy? Moving on to HE. So we have it titled School Board Negotiating Powers and Duties. What I saw is it is school board negotiating rights and responsibilities. So we'll need to change that. With that said, any discussion on policy? Mr. Rao.
Just a grammatical thing for me, the second paragraph should the semicolon be commas.
Yeah. Yes. Anything further on this policy? All right, moving on to HF, school board negotiating agents. Discussion on this, Mr. Rao.
Same thing, last sentence of the first paragraph, there are semicolons. And I would remove the second and third may. Just say, the negotiator may direct, follow, and report. It has may written 3 times, I don't think it's necessary.
Agreed. Anything further on this one? Move on to what I believe is our last one, KE. Public concerns and complaints. Mr. Rao.
Very last sentence, and here's where I've referenced this earlier. The public should not expect discussion or response to this board meeting. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Is that language on the form that our public fills out when they come in the building? Okay.
And I'll take it a step further. On our public agenda, we have a short statement written. I would recommend replacing that with that very verbiage at the end of that policy there. It's similar. It's a little different, but when I read this, so frankly, I do a little intro each time for public comment and citizens participation. When I read this, I would like to replace that with this. I'd like to read this each time for consistency. And then the only other thing was at the very beginning of that, we said the public comment item, we actually call it citizens participation, so I would recommend changing that. Anything further on this one? All right. Thank you all for your input up at the front. Thank you all for your patience in the back.
Section 8 personnel position creation, make a motion to approve resolution 2.1 lead constable as written.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? All right, seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Continuing in section 8 personnel position creation, I make a motion to approve resolution 8.2 constable as written.
Second.
That motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? So one thing I did, I went through the performance responsibilities of each to compare, and they were a little out of order, jumbled. So I started crossing off the ones, and I came up with 4 that are on the lead that aren't on the school constable. 3 of those, which were because they're serving in a slightly different role. But the one so if you look at the lead description, number 5 says serves as the lead for the assigned schools comprehensive safety and security planning committee. Wouldn't that apply to every constable in their school?
Yes.
So I think if we can add, I did not see that was in the list on the school constable one. So if we could copy that over to that one. That was my only item on these 2. Anything further? Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries 4-0.
And finally, in section 8 personnel position creation, I make a motion to approve resolution 8.3 behavioral health coordinator as written.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? If I could just understand where this position fits in the district hierarchy, who do they report to and who may, if not report to them, who looks to them for guidance?
So this position would report directly to our special program supervisor, Michelle Ullman. It would be part of the related services staff, which includes our behavior interventionist or school psychologist or speech language pathologists. And primarily would be an individual that has certified as a board certified behavior analyst, who have been trained and certified in specialized behavior assessments that can then help and be interpreted into behavior plans and improvement plans for student-based behavior that are associated with identified special education needs. And so a position like this, excuse me, would really solidify the legal aspect of the behavior interventions and those portions of IEPs that are being put in place across the school district. Other school districts around us have employed BCBAs in similar roles to this. And so this person, while they would not be responsible for supervising and evaluating individuals, but they would be working very closely with our two behavior interventionists in the planning, preparation, designing of assessments. And then the interventionists would then go out with the students and implement the plans and assist classroom teachers within implementing plans as well.
Okay, so there is no reporting structure to this position.
Correct.
But it is supporting district-wide, specifically the behavior interventionists that are in buildings.
That's correct.
Okay, and funding for this, we intend to use.
Related services units.
Okay.
So in addition to some of the things that the state has done with school counselors, they've also taken school psychologists and put them in what's called the position entitlement report. So they no longer have to be covered by related services units. So this freed up a couple of units that we are going to use for one, we're looking at hiring another support position that we already have in place, just hiring a second person for autism support. But this would be a brand new position that needs to be created.
Okay. And to Mr. Rao's point or question about the constables, this is viewed as being one.
This is one individual.
One
Yes, sir.
position we are. Okay. And then just a really minor thing, I think in the qualifications section, number 6 and number 7 appeared to be different font than the rest. All right, anything further on behavior health coordinator of this motion? All right, seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Section 9 personnel resignations. I make a motion we approve resolutions 9.1 through 9.4 as written.
Second?
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Section 10 personnel retirement. I make a motion we approve resolution 10.1 as written.
Second?
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Section 12 personnel transfers. I make a motion we approve resolutions 12.1 through 12.6 as written.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Section 14 personnel offers of employment. I make a motion we approve resolutions 14.1 through 14.7 as written.
Second?
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Section 16 personnel leaves of absence. I make a motion we approve resolution 16.1 through 16.5 as written.
Second?
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Section 20 personnel appointments. I make a motion we approve resolutions 20.1 and 20.2 as written.
Second?
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Section 24 other business financial reports. I make a motion we approve resolution 24.1, the financial report presented this evening for September 2022.
Second?
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Finally, section 25 of the business board policies, I make a motion to approve resolution 25.1 board policies first reading as modified during discussion and tabling BID and BBB.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Rao. Thank you, Mrs. Starkey. On to section 26, board reports and discussion items. 26.1, Delaware School Board Association, Mrs. Starkey.
We haven't met in October. Our next meeting's in November.
Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Starkey? Moving on to 26.2, Legislative Committee, Mr. Rao.
Actually, our alternate attended the meetings. I will let Dr. Wyatt.
Dr. White.
I had the privilege of representing the board, and it was the first meeting of the year. They went over the general legislative initiatives and discussed some of the priorities for legislation this year. And those included state student-based unit funding, school safety and security, mental and behavioral health services, pre-kindergarten support, adequate state funding, and the big issue was the SAT testing. So I look for that to be pressured away. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Dr. White. Questions, discussion, Mr. Rao.
Sorry, and I don't believe we meet again until February.
The first week of February, yes.
Thank you. Any further questions, discussion? Legislative Committee. All right, on to 26.3, go to the order, opportunity for board members to address other topics not previously covered on the agenda. The floor is open.
Go to a great homecoming game Saturday and a good parade tomorrow, safe parade.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. Dr. Lucas, so I know News Journal reported led throughout the state and all the schools, and then followed up with an article about schools not disclosing. Potentially next meeting, could we just hit a short presentation? I know we really only had a couple items in North that were brought up, but if we could have publicly just an understanding of the testing that occurred, what the results were, what that meant, and what mitigation strategies have been put in place. I think it would be very prudent to do so. You bet. Thank you. Anybody, anything else? All right, don't believe we have a need for executive session. Dr. Lucas? No, sir. Mr. Mullen, any board member? All right, so with that said, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. So moved.
Second.
Have a motion for adjournment properly second. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0. The board's adjourned at 8:13 p.m. I will say that our next meeting is 2 weeks from tonight, Thursday, October 27th, 7 p.m. We're back here in the same spot. Hope you all have a good few weeks and happy homecoming.
Bears.